Hi, my name is Miss Wendy. I'm so glad that you joined us today. What is something that you get tired of? Well, sometimes I get tired of doing laundry, but what's something that you never get tired of? I never get tired of Coke Zero. You want to hear something funny? Back in Jesus's time, the Jews thought that God got tired of listening to them pray, as if God would get annoyed with someone for talking to him, or that there was somehow a limit to how much we could talk to God. So they actually limited their prayers to 3 times a day, and that was it, just 3 times. So here's Jesus, and he knows that that's what people were thinking, that they could only talk to God 3 times a day. And Jesus knew that that's actually not what God was really like. And Jesus loved to teach people about what God was really like. And one of the ways that Jesus would teach people about what God was like and about what God's kingdom was actually like is he would tell them a parable, a little story with a big truth about what God was like. Today, we're going to be in the book of Luke, chapter 18. We're going to start in verse 1. One day, Jesus told his disciples a story to show that they should always pray and never give up. There was a judge in a certain city, he said, who neither feared God nor cared about people. A widow of that city came to him repeatedly and said, "Give me justice in this dispute with my enemy," which means I'm having an argument with this enemy over here. This person is like an enemy to me, and we're arguing about something. I need your help. So the judge ignored her for a while, but finally he said to himself, "I don't fear God or care about people." Well, that's not very nice. "But this woman is driving me crazy. I'm going to see that she gets justice because she is wearing me out with her constant requests." So Jesus tells this story about a widow. Do you know what a widow is? A widow is someone who has lost her husband. Well, back in the days when Jesus was on earth, women really depended on their husbands for protection and for money. So back then, a widow without a husband was really helpless. Sometimes there were bad people who took advantage of them. A mean neighbor could just start planting on a widow's field to plant crops because there was no man at home to challenge him. Or maybe a crummy neighbor would just take some of her sheep or steal water from her well, which would be super dishonest and unfair. And in the story, we're not actually told what happened to this widow, but we know that someone was treating her unfairly because she was a widow and she needed help. She needed justice. She had nowhere to turn except for the judge. And the judge's job is to decide what's right and what's wrong. And when someone does something wrong, a judge is supposed to make sure that there's consequences. So this judge had the ability to make things right for this widow. But sadly, this judge was not a good man. He actually didn't care about the widow at all. He didn't care about poor people. And it even tells us, he admitted, "I don't even care about God." He only cared about himself. So this widow comes to this judge over and over and over again for help, but the judge could care less. He didn't have time for it. He didn't want to help. He didn't want to listen to her. She was annoying him. He probably, when he saw her coming his way, even rolled his eyes. Oh, here she comes again. Can you believe that? So uncaring. But finally, the story tells us that Jesus was telling, finally the judge decides, okay, fine, I'll deal with this. He took care of it. He gave the widow the justice that she was asking for. We aren't exactly told what happened, but for example, if someone had taken one of her sheep, then the judge made sure that the person who took the sheep gave the sheep back. And Jesus tells us in the story why it was that the judge finally decided to help. And it wasn't because the judge was good-hearted and kind. And it wasn't because he knew that God wanted him to do that, because that would be the right thing to do. He was so tired of hearing her. So he finally gave in. He didn't care about the widow. He didn't care about justice. He just wanted some peace and quiet. What words do you think would describe this judge? What do you think? What are some words? What about uncaring? What about selfish? How about annoyed? Now let's think of words that would describe God. Instead of uncaring, God is caring. Instead of selfish, God is so loving. He thinks of the whole picture and he loves us so much. And although this judge is annoyed, does God get annoyed? No, he is so patient. Jesus did not tell this story to say that God gets annoyed by us praying all the time. And so that's why he answers our prayers, to keep us quiet. That's not what Jesus was saying. He's actually showing us that God is completely different than what this judge was like. You know, sometimes we put human qualities and human characteristics onto maybe what God would be like. Sometimes we think that God gets tired of hearing from us or annoyed. And God does not. God is different than us. Listen to what Jesus says in verses 6-8. Learn a lesson from this unjust judge. Even he rendered a just decision in the end. So don't you think that God will surely give justice to his chosen people who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will grant justice to them quickly. But when the Son of Man returns, which is a name Jesus called himself, how many will find on the earth? How many will he find on the earth who have faith? So Jesus is saying, even this awful guy, even this terrible judge, even this guy finally gave in and answered the request. So how much more will our awesome, loving, patient God answer our prayers? That judge was uncaring. God cares deeply for us. 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. The judge did not care about justice. But you know what? God invented justice. He cares about it. Psalm 50 verse 6, the heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is a judge. Also, the judge thought only about his own comfort. He only thought about himself. And the thing is that God gave up every comfort to save us, to rescue us. John 3:17 says, for God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Jesus told this parable to his disciples so that they would not give up. So that when they prayed to God, they would not give up in praying and talking to him, especially when they were praying about things and they didn't feel like they were getting an answer. Jesus knew that in difficult times that people would feel like giving up. Jesus knew that people were praying for God's kingdom to come right now, but God had a different plan. Although he's listening to their prayers, God wants more and more and more people to come into his kingdom before Jesus comes back. So to keep praying and to never give up and trust that God's timing is perfect. God is never too early and he's never too late. He's always right on time. And you know, that's the same for us even now. God is like that. You know, God never changes. And just like Jesus was encouraging the disciples to keep praying, he's encouraging us to keep praying. Trust God. Trust that his timing is good and right, and that God hears us and he's working it out. And in his perfect timing, he will make everything right. 1 Peter chapter 3:12 says, the eyes of the Lord watch over those who do right, and his ears are open to their prayers. He sees you and he hears you. I have a friend named Miss Jody. You may know Miss Jody. When she became a believer, and she decided to follow Jesus, she began to pray for her mom and her dad because they hadn't made that same decision. She tried to talk to them and she wrote them letters explaining the gospel and what Jesus had done for them on the cross. And most of the time, they didn't want to hear what she had to say. But Jody kept praying, and God was working. God was working even though Miss Jody couldn't see what God was up to yet. And she would pray, and she would pray, and she would pray and pray for her mom and her dad to come to know God. And you want to know what? Her dad put his trust in Jesus. 9 years after Jody started praying for him. And then her mom trusted Jesus 4 years after that. That's 13 years of praying. That's longer than some of you have been alive. 13 years Jody prayed for her mom and her dad. That's a long time. Now, do you think it was worth it? Absolutely. 2 precious people entering into God's kingdom, his forever kingdom. So that's an example for you to not get discouraged if you don't see an answer to your prayer right when you think you should be getting an answer to your prayer. Don't give up. Keep praying. Keep asking. God hears your prayers. I want to leave you with this verse from Colossians. Colossians chapter 4, verse 2 says this: devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. Don't you love it that we don't only have to talk to God 3 times a day so he doesn't get annoyed with us? We can talk to God all day, every day. We can pray without ceasing, meaning keep doing it, never stop. Keep praying, keep talking to God. He's listening. Psalm 116, 1 through 2 says, I love the Lord because he hears my voice and my prayer for mercy, because he bends down to listen. Like a very good father, he leans in close. I will pray as long as I have breath. What are you talking to God about? What are you asking him for? What are you saying to him? And what is he saying to you? Prayer is a conversation. You say some stuff, and God has things that he wants to say to you too. Let's pray together. God, thank you for listening. Thank you for bending close. Thank you for recognizing our voice. Thank you for always being with us, that we can talk to you anywhere we go. All day long, that you are close with us and you listen. We trust you. We trust your timing is perfect. We love you, God. Amen. All right, I'll see y'all next time. Bye.